I am frequently surprised when I discuss taxes with my peers and people around me at the common misconceptions about how much tax they pay and how those taxes are used, how that money is used. So the first thing about how much money they pay, a lot of people when they look at their taxes, they just think about how much they paid on their 1040 and compare that to what they think is their gross income. But it's not a complete picture. There's a thing called a payroll tax. A lot of people aren't even aware of it, but it's like 7.5% that your employer pays and files for you. So it's part of your compensation, but you never see it. It's hidden from you. So a lot of people don't know about that. So there's 7.5% right there that people don't even realize that they're paying. Then there are things like state income tax and state sales tax, maybe municipal sales tax. There's property tax. Every time you fill up your car, you pay a gas tax on every gallon. And, every time you register your car for the year, you pay a tax for that. Or if you buy a boat or something, you pay sales tax and then registration, which is a tax, and so on. Pretty much any time money changes hands, it gets taxed. And so people fail to take that into consideration when they think about how much tax they pay. So then I ask them questions like, what is your biggest expense? And nobody ever answers income tax or taxes. They never say my taxes are my biggest expense. They say, oh, my rent or my food. But objectively, your single biggest expense for practically everybody that's working class at least is their tax, how much tax they're paying. They're not even aware of it. They have no idea. Like they've never thought about it. So that's a problem and it needs more awareness. Now, the next part of this is how taxes are used. So a very common thing that people argue with me about is like the size of the military and military spending. Okay, if you cut the military budget in half tomorrow and just said, okay, we're going to cut it in half, you wouldn't significantly impact tax expenditures, the government expenditures. It just wouldn't. Because roughly 80%, and it's almost exactly 80%, if you just break down the federal budget and add up all the social programs, you'll see it's like 80% of federal expenditures is social programs. Things like Social Security or food stamps or Medicare or the VA, all these things, subsidized housing, they all add up to 80% of the expenditures for the federal government. And then everything else, infrastructure and schools and all these different departments and agencies and military, it makes up the remaining 20%. Okay? So if you think about it, if you're going to take the military and cut it in half, and it's like 1/7 or 1/8 of the spending for the country, you're not going to make a big dent cutting 1/8 in half. Now it's down to 1/16. Great. You went from 1/8 to 1/16. It's somewhat of a savings, but it's not a significant one. A significant one would be addressing the welfare situation in the country. And, that's a different video with different arguments for why the social programs should or should not exist. But just think about and consider these issues, because many of my peers, they have no idea. They've never thought about these things. They don't realize that the United States is already kind of this communist country where you're working a significant portion of your day and that value is being taken from you, that money has been taken from you and given to people who didn't earn it. And, a lot of people just don't realize that there's a connection there. Like, okay, I'm working for a whole class of people that don't work because they're lazy. Now, a lot of people will say, oh, this welfare class, these people are oppressed and they're handicapped and disabled and so on. And some of them are. And that is what those programs are meant to address. But many of them are not. Many of them are people who are able-bodied and are just really, at the end of the day, too lazy to work. They don't want to work, and they just underperform on purpose with intent. And it's very common that people are having babies and being single mothers and breaking the houses up, breaking the families up, just specifically to gain benefits, social welfare benefits. And you're working part of your day to pay for that. You're working part of your day to pay for an entire class of people that do that. And so that disconnect of understanding is very common. I've seen it a lot. Now, another thing with taxes, and this is kind of a big deal. right now for whatever silly reason. People have this idea that, oh, if we just tax the billionaires and the mega companies their fair share, then all of our tax problems would be fixed. But let's say that you could do that. Let's say that you could tax all the billionaires 99% of their wealth. Like, who needs $100 billion, right? $1 billion is surely enough. We just take 99 billion. Let's say that you did that, and that addressed today's spending issues. Okay, now you have a bunch of broke billionaires. You're not taxing them again. Like, they're not going to be, the $100 billion that they've accrued isn't going to show up again next year. You've taken it from them, and that's both destroyed their motivation to earn, and also it took them a whole life probably to accrue that, sometimes generations to accrue that. And so that's a one-time seizure, confiscation. Let's say that you did that though, and you could do that. What will happen? Well, that money will be spent, and programs will increase in size, and really all it will result in is bloat. The system will bloat. It's already bloated to match capacity at every opportunity. You think that taking the billionaires' money is going to change that? And so you'll still have the exact same set of problems and the exact overspending problem that you currently have. Just now, all the people that you just seized the means of production from all the people that are producing, actually high-performing producers. The other part of this is you can't tax a billionaire. You just can't. You could raise the rate to 100%, and you won't collect $1 more in tax. All you'll end up doing is putting a ceiling on the middle class so that they can't escape. That's what you're going to end up doing. And if you look at income tax in general, that's what's already happened to the middle class. When income tax was introduced 100-something years ago, it was sold to the public as this is only going to affect the extremely high income earning people, the elites. It's only going to affect the rich. That's how they sold it. But it turns out that's not how it's been used. And now you can't afford rent and food. And you see how we've got here and where this is going. And the reason you can't tax a billionaire is because the way they get money is through non-taxable events. Now, there are many ways, and they're very complex schemes, but it basically comes down to this. They use debt, or they use other ways, equivalent ways of leveraging their assets into getting money or getting compensated. And there's no way to tax it. And so when you look at someone, I'm not going to name any names because I don't want to get in trouble, but if you look at someone with ultra high net worth, almost universally, they don't have like billions of dollars sitting in a bank account. Okay? Very few people have hordes of cash sitting in a bank account that you could just go take. What they have are assets that are equal on paper to these huge amounts of money. All right. For example, if the owner of a large company, of a major company, owns a significant number of the shares, and the shares grow every year, and so he'll take loans out against the shares, which is non-taxable, and then the shares grow in value, and he takes more loans out against it, and it's a house of cards for them. And they never pay tax, and they never actually receive any money that's theirs at the end of the day. And they do that until the day they die, and then they hand the company off to their heirs or whoever, and it continues to grow. That's the whole basis for that scheme, for that approach. Similar things exist with real estate, a bunch of different programs for either not paying tax or carrying forward a tax that has a reduced amount as a result, that they pay a significantly reduced tax. And there's no real way to solve this. All you're going to end up doing is putting a ceiling on yourself and saying that nobody can be successful from this point forward. And I think that a lot of these ultra net worth, high net worth people actively encourage this, because then it means upward mobility is limited, and therefore they will never have competition for their top spot, or they'll have reduced competition. Because, life's a competition. This whole thing is one giant race against your fellow man to get as much as you can. And if you fail to understand the brutal nature of the competition in the world for resources, then your viewpoints they're not really accurate. So I hope this gives you a few things to think about regarding taxes. The federal government most of its money is being spent on social programs. Your primary expense is taxes. And, it's impossible. You're never going to tax ultra high net worth people. The only times that's been tried, the only way you can really tax ultra high net worth people would be to seize the means of production from them. And then who's going to run those companies? Do you think the government's going to do a better job of running stuff? That in itself is a delusional idea. So as you move forward in life, these are just some things to consider. And, awareness is half the battle.